Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Ghost Chronicles Next Generation. I am Ron Kolek, the crypt keeper to the realm of the living and the dead. New England's own Van Helsing. With me is the amazing, warm-blooded, blonde bombshell herself, and Kerrigan.
Well, good evening. It's a lovely evening in the cemetery, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. So, cemeteries, that's your thing, right?
Yes.
So, what's the latest dirt on
Here
it?
we are.
Anyways, we got a great show to you tonight because this is one of your favorite things. You are actually a taffy-phile.
A taffy-phile, a taff-o-phile.
Yeah, which is,
lover
for those who don't know.
Lover of cemeteries, lover of tombstones. And yes, we have a very exciting show planned this evening, and we're going to keep our guest a secret. Well, no, it was on the web, okay? So it's not a secret, right? Okay. No, but this evening's guest is going to be Roxie Zwicker, cemetery authority and author, and all kinds of other cool things associated with cemeteries and haunted cemeteries.
Authority expert.
What makes her an expert?
Anyone.
Oh, well, you learn about it, you read about it, you study it. Poof, you're an expert. I don't know.
So, I mean, would a grave digger be a bigger expert? We should have had a grave digger on the show. Wouldn't that have been cool?
Well, I don't think they actually do this anymore. They get the backhoe in and just take it out.
But they must have some funny stories, huh?
I would imagine.
Funny stories.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
I have to really tell you a story, and it's not really funny, but my brother-in-law died. He was 39 years old.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it was a long time ago. But we were at the cemetery, and you know, they're doing the thing at the grave, and the little elevator thing busted, and so he went, whoop.
Oh, no. That's terrible.
Yeah, it was.
That's awful.
But you know
really
what?
awful.
I could see him almost laughing.
Well, maybe he did it.
Yeah, whatever.
Maybe he did.
You know, we talk about death and we talk about cemeteries and we talk about hauntings. I mean, why would cemeteries be haunted?
You know, I don't really know.
I mean, you spend a lot of time in the cemeteries.
Yeah.
You love dead people.
I do.
Does that make
I
you?
absolutely do. I like their stones better, but
Excuse me.
they're graves. They're graves.
Yeah.
You know, I don't honestly know, because if I was going to haunt somewhere, I think the last place I would want to be is my grave, unless somebody was there and I wanted to mess with them. But I don't know.
I mean, we'll ask Roxie and she can tell
We'll
us
ask
what
her
she
that.
thinks about it. Yeah, I know if I died, I would probably haunt the Playboy Mansion. I'm just saying. You know, if I had a place to go. And
Oh, well.
it's better than, you know, where? Some basement?
That's true.
Some attic?
Why would you want to
Give
hang
me a
out in the
break,
attic
you
when you
know?
could be
Yeah,
at the Playboy
okay.
Mansion, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So I could read the articles. I'm just saying.
You're about as old as Hef, right?
Just about.
There you go.
Is he still alive?
Yes. They're waiting for some playmate to kill him, I think.
But, you know, they actually, I think they had a ghost hunting team from the Playboy Mansion.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you get on that team?
I don't know. I remember Jeff Belanger, they actually, he had his book, right? I think it was The World's Most Haunted Places, which I contributed to, by the way.
Okay.
But he actually has a picture of one of the Playboy bunnies pulling it off the shelf.
Really?
It's a true story.
Pulling the book off the shelf?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
Yeah, so there you go.
Leave it to Jeff to arrange that.
All right, so that's all I have on cemeteries. So.
All right. Well, speaking of cemeteries,
Right.
I think that we might leave this cemetery for the moment.
Oh, yeah. You like our cool cemetery, by the way?
Planted, freshly planted.
There you go.
And
Trust me, I did it myself.
that's right. That's why I still got that shovel.
Can you dig it?
So I think that we should go ahead and play this month's cemetery tripping, and we'll be back in just a minute.
With Roxie Zwicker.
Welcome to Cemetery Tripping, where I will feature a different cemetery in each episode that I hope you will seek out and enjoy as much as I do. As an avid taphophile, or lover of tombstones, I spend a lot of time in the local New England area in the beautiful and historic cemeteries we have here. The stones here are like no others, and I have literally thousands of pictures of the intricate and symbolic carvings found on them. Today I would like to tell you about King's Chapel Burying Ground in Boston, Massachusetts. Established in 1630, it is Boston's oldest burying ground and was located on the outskirts of what was then a new Puritan settlement. It was first called the Burying Place, prior to the opening of Copp's Hill Burying Ground, and then called the Old Burying Place. Eventually, it adopted the name of its neighbor, King's Chapel, although it has never been affiliated with that or any other church. In the first 30 years of its existence, the people buried here were predominantly English-born immigrants who came to the New World seeking religious freedom and new economic opportunity. Approximately 600 gravestones and 29 tabletop tombs are left today to mark the more than 1,000 people buried in this small space, which is tucked like a bookmark amongst the old and the new buildings. Perhaps the most famous of the gravestones in the cemetery is that of Joseph Tapping, a Boston shopkeeper who died at the age of 23, of whom little else is known. It is one of the most elaborate in the burying ground and is immediately visible upon entering. It is a work of art conceived by the unnamed carver known as the Charlestown Stonecutter. Some of the beautifully carved symbolic images show a skull with wings representing the soul leaving the body, an hourglass representing time running out, a skeleton of death snuffing out the candle of life, and a bearded figure of Father Time attempting to stop death. Other notable figures who reside in King's Chapel are John Winthrop, first governor of Massachusetts, Elizabeth Payne, partial inspiration for Nathaniel Hawthorne's character Hester Prynne in The Scarlet Letter, Mary Chilton, first woman off the Mayflower, and William Dawes, who rode the midnight ride with Paul Revere. You can find Paul in the granary just down the street, but that's a story for another time. One of the interesting items in a corner of the cemetery is a large hole covered by an ornate structure of wrought iron and brick. Tourists often have no idea that this is actually a subway ventilation shaft. It was built in 1896 when Boston's subway system became the first in the country. Human remains from the graves disturbed by this construction were reburied in another part of the burying ground. As you move around the burying ground, you will note a common theme: the uncertainty of colonial life as disease, childbirth, and smallpox claimed their victims before their time. 7 epidemics of smallpox were experienced in Boston by 1730. Almost a quarter of the surviving grave markers in Boston's 17th century burying grounds are for children 9 years old or younger. Spouses were lost young to both men and women, sometimes in multiples, so remarriage was not only encouraged, but important to the survival of their families. The best way to get to King's Chapel Burying Ground is public transportation. Park Street Station is just down the street at the Boston Common. A short walk up the hill and you will arrive at your destination. Just follow the red line of the Freedom Trail, which runs right past the cemetery. When you arrive, take a moment to contemplate this incredible piece of history and the changes that have gone on around it during its 380 years on this earth.
That was sad.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
those poor Puritans got killed by everything back then,
Really?
That's what happens.
Do they put it on the graves when they get killed off, like
Occasionally. Occasionally they
fell
do.
into the corn husker or something?
I've seen graves and they say Sometimes there's one actually in the cemetery across the street that he was killed while building a house.
Really?
A beam, he was killed by a beam. I've seen
Beam me up, Scotty.
struck by lightning.
Really?
Yes, things like that. But I'm sure our guests can fill us in on way more interesting things.
Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce to you someone who knows a lot about cemeteries and all about cool stuff in New England. She is the founder of New England Curiosities. She is an author, and she is a swell person, Roxie Zwicker. Ta-da!
Hi, thanks.
Oh, welcome, welcome. We're excited to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here talking about one of my favorite things, cemeteries.
Absolutely.
Don.
What?
I thought you said me, so I was
Not
my
you.
favorite thing. I was like, whatever. I don't know. So cemeteries, you've written books about cemeteries?
I have. I've written 7 books on New England ghost stories and folklore. 3 of them have focused specifically on cemeteries, and the others have had cemetery stories in them.
Really? Is that one of your books there?
Yep, I have. I brought 2 of my cemetery books with
So
me.
hold it up so that we can see what they look like.
This is Haunted Cemeteries in New England, Story Stones and
Can
Superstitions.
we have a close-up of that, please?
Hello.
Close-up, please.
He's working on it. He's working on it.
There you go.
There
Hold
you
it up a
go.
little higher.
There we go.
Undeflected. Good. No, you.
That's
crooked.
good.
That's crooked.
There we
That's
go.
Good enough.
There we go. So
Whatever.
this is a pretty comprehensive book, not only on cemeteries, but what the stones are about, the epitaphs and the superstitions that went along with burying folks back in the day.
Really?
Yep. And my latest book is the Massachusetts Book of the Dead, and I also have the New Hampshire Book of the Dead, which is specifically about each state and the burying grounds, superstitions, ghosts, all that fun stuff. There is no shortage of cemetery
I gave
stories.
you one of those for your birthday, didn't I?
Yes,
I did.
I think.
I even had it signed by the author.
Yes,
Imagine that.
yes.
Because that's the kind of guy I am.
I know, I know. You know I like
Too
those
sweet,
things.
too
Aw,
sweet.
Whoop.
That was an interesting
We
shot.
lost the book.
That was a good shot.
Stop. You're terrible.
I know.
Um,
Anyway,
So how
moving right along.
I would like to know how you got involved with cemeteries, writing about cemeteries, why you love cemeteries, all of the above.
All of the above, all at once in one answer. My first, I guess, encounter with cemeteries had to be in Western Massachusetts, where I grew up. I grew up in the Northampton, Amherst area, and one of the first cemeteries I went to was Old Deerfield. And it was on a field trip, and it was just beyond amazing to me. I think I was probably in the 7th or 8th grade and just fell in love with the stones. And then the houses in the village were still there. And it really just kind of struck a chord because not only could you see where the people lived, but you could see where they were buried. And much like you were just saying, read the stories on the stones. So I definitely was very intrigued by that. I got into the ghost stories at a friend's birthday party, believe it or
Really?
not. Yeah.
Did you have a flashlight under your face? And
I didn't. It was actually, it was broad daylight, and it wasn't an older cemetery. And my friend lived right next to a cemetery. So after we opened presents and ate the cake, I'm like, come on, let's go into the cemetery. Let's go. So I think I was probably 10 or 11, walked into the cemetery and, you know, just curious about the stones. And there was one particular stone, and I put my hands on it, and I swore it was vibrating.
Wow.
And I took a closer look, and it was a child's grave. I think they were probably about 3 or 4 years old. And I said, all right, so is this me? And I asked my friend, I said, can you touch it too? And she said, yeah, I feel it too. So there wasn't a truck going by. I mean, we were off, you know, in the woods. It was pretty amazing. So I kind of thought there was something to it. And being in New England, you can't miss the old cemetery down the road. I mean,
no.
everybody has a cemetery pretty much in their
Right.
backyard.
Sometimes literally.
No, really, literally. Yeah, I live in Kittery, Maine, and we have a small family plot right in our backyard for about a dozen people from the 1800s. And when we moved in, when they showed us the place, they're like, you might not want to feel too good about the cemetery behind you. Might not be a good selling point. And I'm like, where do we sign?
Oh, yeah. It's mine.
Yeah.
It's my cemetery
Yep,
now.
yep.
Oh, that's awesome. And I have to say, and I've been to Old Deerfield, and I've been to that cemetery. And it's just a fantastic cemetery. I love it.
It
And it's,
is.
that's one where they have one of the stones has the coffin with the mother and the baby.
Yeah, and it shows on the carving exactly the way the baby was buried on her left arm. And sadly, even the stone carver who carved that stone actually has his own story as well. He died by drowning in the local river in his 30s by suicide, and there's only a handful of those particular stones that he carved, and that's a one-off for him.
Wow.
So yeah, you once you start looking at the stones, you want to know more not only about the people that are buried there, but about the carvers as well. And of course, the ghosts go hand in hand, sometimes literally.
Right.
So we were talking about that before we introduced you, is if you were a ghost, why would you haunt a cemetery? Why wouldn't you haunt somewhere else?
Well, I think, using the word haunt, I don't always see it as particularly haunting. There is a cemetery that I went up to in Antrim, New Hampshire. I don't know if they have the picture that they can show. It wasn't so much a haunting. I walked in and there were so many children's graves that were there. They all died from a dysentery epidemic. Over 60 children in the community had passed away.
It's a little
and
squishy.
it's a little squished.
Little squishy.
Little squished. And
Sorry.
that's okay. In the 1800s, and as I walked into the cemetery, I felt hands, small hands grabbing mine.
Oh.
And I felt as though they were looking for comfort and direction. So I don't think they were there trying to scare me away. I think they were just there because someone was there that cared. And I've gone back to that cemetery a number of times, both in the daylight and at night, and had experiences with the children that are there. I think they appreciate that people are coming.
That's
so
awesome.
we're running through a lot of pictures.
Yeah, can we
I don't
not
know.
hold up on the pictures, okay? We just wanted that one picture in the beginning.
Here we
All
go.
right, here we go.
Okay, that was interesting.
That is a neat story. That's
So
Isn't that freaky though? I mean, isn't that what you see in the horror movies where you see the hands coming out of the ground, grab?
It was definitely a shocking experience at first when I first felt it, but then you could feel that it was a small hand, and it was just this sensation of I want comfort. Can you comfort me? I want to walk with you, and it's at first it's a little spooky, but then you're like, wait a minute, there's someone that's here.
right.
They're not trying to hurt me. I understand what the story was. You're looking at a whole summer in the 1800s of all these children that died.
Wow.
So you have to get beyond the scare.
That is fascinating. And what cemetery was this again?
That's called the Meeting House Cemetery. It's up on a dirt road in Antrim, New Hampshire, Meeting House Hill.
Nice.
And the site for the meeting house is still there, although the building is gone. And this is just a great old cemetery at the top of a hill in the woods.
Nice.
It's just beautiful.
Oh,
Beautiful, not scary at all.
love those.
Very active.
I was one up by the lake region, and they had a stone, and one guy was going this way, and one guy was going this way. It's like, couldn't make up his mind.
Oh, the hands.
Yeah, what's up
I
with that?
remember when you posted that. Yeah.
Whatever. So what was that?
Well, I know the one.
Now, you're big into symbolism.
Yeah, well, the one pointing up obviously is going to be,
going to heaven.
Going to heaven.
It was the other one.
I don't know. Why would there be one pointing down? Do you have
Couldn't
any
make up his
thoughts?
mind. Maybe he was like teetering on the line,
Well, I think it kind of goes back to probably one of the most popular epitaphs that there is. As you walk by, as I was, now you soon will be. That eventually your fate will be in the ground.
Right.
So pay attention to living your life. That's why a lot of people, not only did they list how old they were, but how many months and how many days,
Right.
because you were to cherish every moment on earth. So I think the hand pointing down says, hey, this is your fate. So what are you going to do with your life?
Right. Right. There's your answer.
Or it could be, you gotta die first before you can go to heaven. Right?
Right.
Well,
Whatever.
but in the 16 and 1700s, there really wasn't a big concept of heaven. It wasn't preached as that. Everybody was going basically to hell back in the days.
Right.
Even if you felt you were amongst the chosen few and went to church and did what you were supposed to do, You know, hell was preached as a place of unspeakable terrors. Children were shown corpses. They were told their parents would testify against them at the Last Judgment.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
It was a very
Mine
different world back
Yours
then.
would, Ron's would. I know, right. I mean, that was, the Puritans were not a fun bunch, and
Nah.
you probably, you had to earn your way in, right?
Well, and you had to think about, what was going on in our communities at the time. Your life expectancy was about 30. Many women died in childbirth.
Right.
There was no modern medicine, no vaccination. Ships carried in disease from all around the world. So, death was on everybody's doorstep, and it was literally brought home. We didn't have the sanitized, someone dies and, someone else takes care of it. You took care of your dead, and you brought them to the cemetery, and you dressed them, and you did all of that. So, that's one of the reasons why we have the symbolism on the stones and the epitaphs that are there.
So what was your coolest cemetery that you liked the best?
Oh, there are so many.
Do we have any photos of any of
We
them?
do. If we could go to the Jamaica Plain Cemetery, that's
take a
Forest
second.
Hills.
Forest Hills,
Yep,
yeah.
that's Forest Hills. Forest Hills is an amazing cemetery because it's one of the garden cemeteries. And it has all of the beautiful mausoleums and statuary that came about in the 19th century. But this photograph is one of the reasons why I really fell in love with the cemetery. You can see there's a red-tailed hawk and a bird bath about 10 feet away from me. And the bird life that you see in some of these cemeteries is really phenomenal, let alone the grave markers that are there. There's a lot of ghost stories at Forest Hill. There's a lot of amazing carvings of children in there for various reasons. There's the little boy in the boat that a lot of people describe having experiences by. But it's really just quite remarkable. So when people are always asking me, what's so cool about Forest Hills, I have to show them this picture. I mean, the bird life is just phenomenal.
Oh, I love that. There's another, it's so, that cemetery, I mean, it's so huge.
You can't do it all in a day.
You can't do it in one day.
It's impossible.
I was there, I think, for one afternoon. And, I got so tired after a while. I'm like, all right, let's get back in the car and we'll drive around. But, yeah, the boy in the boy in the boat. There's a girl, Gracie.
Yes,
and
little Gracie.
A glass encased
chamber,
in glass.
yep.
And there's also a little boy in an even bigger glass chamber. And you come upon these things, and I had never seen anything like that in any cemetery I had ever been to. So I came upon this thing, and I was just like, oh my God, it's amazing. And of course, the stone is perfectly preserved because it's encased in glass. So those are just fantastic.
It is really amazing. And of course, the story about the boy is that he drowned in a pond while he was chasing his rabbit on the hillside. But the sad part of the story is his mother wanted to be buried with him, and she couldn't be. She didn't have enough money to be buried with him. So that is one of the thoughts behind the ghost story, that the spirit at his grave is actually his mother.
Wow.
Because she could not be buried with him. She couldn't afford to be because she was a maid.
Right.
So you start delving into all these layers, and it just makes the story so rich. So if we could go to another picture. I try to send you some of the pictures of my favorite cemeteries. Anyone is fine. I'm sure I can tell you a little story about it.
Pick one, Russ.
Anyone, what do you got in there?
Pick a card, any card. All right, we're thinking about that in the control room there.
Anyway, so there we go.
There's one. Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is the old York Burying Ground over in York, Maine, which is pretty much right up the road from me. And this is the grave of Mary Nason, and she is the alleged witch of the town of York. And her ghost story and legend has been documented since the 1830s, which is pretty amazing to have a story going back that far. A lot of people visit this cemetery, which dates from 1705, and that's her headstone there, to see the witch stone. So that long slab that you saw behind her headstone is said to be the witch stone. And of course, the legend was that it was placed over her grave to keep her from rising up out of the grave. And of course, what it is, it's a wolf stone, and it was designed to keep the animals from rooting up the body. There's a great story of people coming out of the church right across the street after Sabbath services, and they saw the pigs rooting around in this cemetery. So they had all the wolf stones. But the funny thing of it is today is when you walk the Old York Burying Ground, she's the only one with the stone. So I always like to say to people, you know, they pulled all the other stones up for stone walls and what have you. You know, would you want to be the one to remove the stone on the witch's grave that's keeping her in there? So she has the only wolf stone there. And hers is one of the most visited graves in the town of York, just because she has a beautiful portrait stone carved by the Lamson family from Boston. And people have had experiences at her gravesite. However, there are several other ghost stories in the cemetery as well. There's tales of shadow people who used to appear in the burying ground at night, the night before someone in town was going to die in the 18th and 19th century. However, what's interesting is, and I don't know if you've ever noticed, that when you're in the old cemeteries right around dusk, especially if the moon's coming up, it almost looks like, due to the shape of the gravestones, that there are people walking through the cemetery with the head and shoulders and the shape. So was it really a spirit walking through the Old York Burying Ground, or was it the moonlight shining on the gravestones? We'll never know, but people used to assemble to see the shadow man who was the portent of who was going to die the next day.
Oh my God.
There you go.
That's kind of like, you know, well, I was going to say almost like reading the obituaries, but.
I actually had a guy on the Ghost Chronicles original show at WCCM, and he had a death doll, and the doll would tell you when you were going to die.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool.
That's very creepy.
Yeah, we asked people to call in and find out if they wanted to know when they would, but nobody called in. I couldn't figure that out.
Scared to death.
So anyways,
Who wants to know
going
that?
back to the wolf stones, I mean, if you go on the internet now, and you're gonna see all kinds of stuff all about these are to keep the people in, to keep the vampires in. So we're still keeping those legends alive with today's modern technology, even though it's absolutely not true.
Well, what's interesting is you know, back in the day when they were using the wolf stones, people weren't buried 6 feet under like they are now. There's so many stories of, you know, dirt being washed off the tops of coffins during storms. You know, plus grave diggers were only paid so much, and who knows, you know, how long they wanted to spend digging the graves. And certainly now we have a technology where, you know, they pour a form in there, so they're actually going down in the concrete, just not in the dirt. And plus, you know, especially New Hampshire and Maine, everything's so rocky and granite, not everybody is underneath. So, especially in the 19th century, it was interesting because it wasn't just animals. They wanted to stop grave robbers from digging them up and reusing the coffins or stealing whatever people might have been buried with. But I think we're still fascinated with that because from time to time, you know, pieces are washing out of cemeteries. Certainly Copp's Hill in Boston's got a lot of evidence of that as well.
There's actually a cemetery that has no bodies in it.
Where's that?
You would ask me that.
Well.
I believe it's in New Hampshire, but I could be wrong.
So-
There was a flood, and all the coffins actually got washed out of the cemetery
Oh, ew.
and
Yeah, that's terrible.
down the river, because I was right on the riverbank, and they got washed out down the river, and so the cemetery is empty. The stones were still there, but the bodies got washed out. So they set up the stones again, but
Wow,
the bodies went down the river.
that's terrible.
Yeah, I think it's in Tom D'Agostino's book, I believe. I'll have to dig it up. Anyway,
There you go.
carry on.
You're killing me, really. You're killing me.
It's a true story,
Okay.
because I read it in a book.
All right.
Not
'Cause
the
you,
internet.
you read on the no. Should we pick another picture? Is
Absolutely.
Sure, let's pick another
Let's choose
picture.
another picture.
What do we got in
There
there?
was one in there from Vermont. Maybe we
Yeah,
can-
there's a couple in there from Vermont.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
of course,
we'll do
this
this
is
one.
yeah. We'll do this one. This is one of those real surprising stories about Boston Common. That if you walk down the far end of Boston Common, there is the cemetery that's there. And of course, it's rather obvious once you walk through. There's a lot of gravestones. There's a little girl ghost that haunts that particular burying ground. But this one particular stone is really quite disturbing when you think about when they were building the subway in Boston. In order to build the subway, they actually disturbed a lot of burying grounds, and there's a lot of documentation about these bodies being discovered and doctors examining them. And there is one big hole in Boston Common that has over 3,000 people that were disinterred when they were building the subway and reinterred here. There's no names, there's no
3,000 people?
3,000 people.
Wow.
Yep,
That's a big hole.
I actually have the whole letter of the doctor's examination of a lot of the bodies
In
that
your
were
Book of the
disinterred
Dead?
in my Massachusetts Book of the Dead.
Wow.
So the gravestones, we don't know what happened to them.
They count them?
They did count them. They did a full inventory on everybody.
Wow.
So, and they said that it's about 3,000. It actually probably is more. So there's a great big hole in the cemetery where all of these bodies were just thrown in. And it's no wonder. So it tells you, the Boylston Street Mall, which of course we know now as the subway in Boston. And it's really just, it's quite startling when you walk through the cemetery to see one grave marker for 3,000 people.
That's the one down, on the far.
It's on
end,
the
like
east
if you were
end.
walking up from the theater district.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that cemetery.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cemetery.
Very cool.
What
stones.
cemetery don't you like, though?
Oh, I know. I know. I love them all. But that one has a great stone in it with. It's got bees. There's a tree, and there's bees, and then there's a book, I think.
It's
with
a Masonic stone.
Bible verses in it.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep,
Love
that's
it.
the Masonic
and
stone
it
in
was
there.
Just so I love Masonic stones because they're just so ripe with symbolism, and that one was just so cool. And it didn't have it didn't have the actual Bible verse, but it had the the name and the number.
Right, the chapter and verse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
chapter and verse. That's what I'm trying to think. So.
Well, it's interesting with Masonic stones because depending on the level and degree of the Mason, you're going to have more and more and more symbolism as they made all these different degrees. So some of them are, the one on the cover of my New Hampshire book is a Masonic stone, and it's got like 30 symbols.
Yeah.
It's really
wow.
cool.
Oh, I didn't know. I don't know a lot about. I know the Masonic symbols, but I didn't know that. And that's very cool to know because there's some that I had seen up in Franklin, Mass, and there's two stones side by side, and they're both Masonic stones, and they have tons of symbols. I'd never seen so many symbols on one stone. It's kind of you stand there and you go, oh my God, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, there are, if you take a look, and I know you're big into researching these things, take a look, there is a chart out there which would be a great reference for you or anybody to take to a cemetery, and it tells you what degree each symbol is from the shoe to the coffin to the book, all of those different things out there.
Yeah. Oh, neat. All right, I have to look that up. That's my next.
So you have to keep it in your car when you're walking around these places.
I'll put it in my cemetery, my David Allen Lambert, right?
Yep.
The cemetery. If anybody is looking, if you're in Massachusetts, there's this fantastic Massachusetts guide, to cemeteries, and I always have it.
Yeah, it's great.
It's in my truck, but it's David Allen Lambert. Massachusetts. It's just Massachusetts.
You can get it through the Historical
Cemeteries?
Society.
Yeah.
Massachusetts Cemeteries,
But,
and it goes back to the first ones.
Fabulous resource, and I wish they had them in every state, and they just don't.
Yeah.
It's kind of catch as you can when you're other places, and I'm like.
So what places can people do research for cemeteries besides this book?
Well, one of the best places that I found is, through the Genealogical Register. Local historical societies, it really depends. Some are much better than others and have more resources than others. Depends on the library. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, we're really lucky because we have the Athenaeum, which is a private library established in the 1800s. So it has a lot of the transcriptions of the burying grounds, which are really, really hard to find. But genealogy is a great place to start. And believe it or not, church records. Because records of cemeteries were kept by the church due to the services that they may have held there. So those are a few resources.
What about that Find a Grave?
Find a Grave's pretty good. I think there's more, if you're going for more of the backstory and more of the symbolism, there's other places to look. But if you're looking specifically just to find a grave, they're out there. And more are added daily to that.
I always look for my name and I can... Luckily, I haven't found it yet.
Oh, it's coming. It's
Yeah,
coming.
I
No.
don't doubt it.
I won't say
We'll let
that.
you know.
I won't say that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Find a Grave. If for those that don't know what Find a Grave is, it's an internet resource. If you're trying to find somebody, you can actually go to Find a Grave and send out a request. If you're looking for a particular stone, and I get them a lot. You can register, like someone like me or like Roxie, we're always in cemeteries, and you can register and say, well, I'm in this area. If you're looking for the stone of a loved one or doing your genealogy, you know, but you live in Michigan. So you could go on Find a Grave and say, you know, I'm looking for somebody to go and photograph this grave and post it to Find a Grave. So that is a really, I think that is the coolest thing.
It is
and I
really
love when I
cool.
get those, you know, if I have time to go out and do it, you know, and it's like in Brockton or, you know, the next town over from me, you know, and then you just go and you add it. It's a pretty simple thing, and it helps people so much, you know, if you're looking for things like that.
And there are sites on the internet where you can find cemeteries as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
there's getting to be
So
more
if you want to
and
get
more.
lazy, right, then you can go on the internet and not use Wikipedia, but there are other sites.
Well, one of the other things, and again, you know, being in New England, we're so lucky, is we have a lot of, you know, antique shops out there. One of the things I do is spend a lot of times going to antique shops and looking for memorabilia and photographs. And some of the photographs I've found that have names on them, I will go back and look up the names. And I've actually contacted family members and said, hey, you know, I've got a picture of this woman, and I'd scan it and email it to them so that way they would have it.
Oh, that's cool.
So I kind of back into it that way too, or I'll go and find the grave myself.
Neat.
So I keep a lot of things in my collection because I never know where I'm going to be.
Oh,
That's interesting.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that.
Because
What a
I
great
have
idea.
some stuff that was supposed to be buried with the body, and
Yeah, but you don't have any names.
well, yeah,
go
I have a
with it.
Bible, I have a photograph, and I have the brooch. And there's actually a name, of course, in the Bible because people used to write things in the Bible at the thing. So I could find the grave for this person,
You could try that. Sure.
and I could dig her up and put the
Oh,
stuff in
stop
it, and that way she can rest in peace.
Nice.
Y-
nice.
If you dig it up, no one's going to rest in peace. I mean, Newburyport, come on, how many times has that cemetery been dug up and no one's resting in peace there?
Newburyport.
Newburyport, Massachusetts. You know that story.
Newburyport. Which one is that?
About the tomb that's been opened 3 times, most recently, probably about 5 years ago. There were some folks on work release doing some work in the
It's longer than that
cemetery.
now, Roxy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know that story.
absolutely.
Did you want to do your did you want to do your little cemetery story?
Well, now that you mention it, I can.
All right.
So if we can get my little script from the teleprompter, maybe I can read it.
Oh, teleprompter girl. Hello. All right.
Okay, putting my glasses on. Can we have, Russ, can we have the cemetery, what is that called? The first picture?
The hearse house
No, the picture of the cemetery?
picture. Oh, the old burying ground.
Old burial ground. Can we have that, Russ?
Can you see that there?
It's kind of crooked.
Oh,
You want to read it? No, I'll read it.
no.
Here we go. The
know where
old,
that
whatever that is.
The old graveyard.
Okay.
If TJ, could you just turn the camera a little bit for us?
Just,
Towards just a hair towards.
this is not
Mr.
live or
Ron.
anything, so you don't have to
Yeah,
worry
I know.
about it. There you go.
Oh,
That's
there we
good.
go.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, whatever comes in my head. While on the prowl looking for haunted items in the antique shops, Roxy,
That's Roxy.
I discovered a quaint little cemetery on Main Street in Essex. That's Massachusetts. Since I wasn't having any luck with my quest, I decided to stroll through the cemetery on a pleasant day. Today, the cemetery is well kept, but it has a sinister past. In 1680, in a section of Ipswich, then known as Chibacco, didn't know that, did you?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, either did I. Later named Essex, a 1-acre piece of land was granted to the Chibacco parish for a burial place. The Chibacco, how come that's not capitalized, by the way?
Sorry.
All right. Parish later became the second church, thank God, in Ipswich. And Reverend John Wise became the pastor in 1680. The tract of land was given to him by the town by Mr. Cogswell. And we actually have a hearse house that's coming up on a knoll, which was later called Meeting House Hill. Why are they always called Meeting House Hill?
That's
They
where they
always
were.
Yeah, anyways. So in 1938, the burying ground was expanded, and on the grounds of this peaceful burial ground stands a wooden structure known as the hearse house. Now, can we have the picture of the hearse house so that we can see what this
There we go.
hearse house is? Hearse house. So,
Is it
anyways.
different than his house?
Yep. Hearse. There you go.
There's the hearse house.
So, I mean, that looks like ordinary to you, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, I mean, what would you think it was?
They kept hearses in it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what you thought. It's
Yeah.
a little garage. But no, listen. It is said to be the common grave of no less than 8 bodies.
Oh,
Not 9, 8.
8.
With a sinister connection. It seems the victims were there. Oh, it seems the bodies, I guess.
They were the victims.
Thank you very much for reading that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, the bodies were the victims of a bizarre work of Dr. Thomas Sewell. Is that Sewell or Sewell?
So,
Sewell. The corpses were said to be used by the good doctor for what is described as anatomical purposes.
Very good,
Did I
Ron.
get that right word?
Anatomical. Very good.
Over a period of time until his hideous activities were discovered in 1818. Dr. Sewell
So well, something like that.
was brought to trial for being in possession of an unsanctioned corpse, grave robbery, and body snatching. That can't be good. And despite being defended by, ta-da, Daniel Webster,
Wow.
who I actually spoke to Daniel Webster.
Really?
Yep. Maureen,
See, I knew you were old.
Maureen and I did an investigation up at Dartmouth College, and Daniel Webster came through.
Awesome.
True. That's the first famous person I ever spoke to.
We
who
can
was
take the
dead.
hearse house down now. Thank you.
No, it's good. You
Oh,
don't have to see my
okay.
face.
Oh, there you are.
Whatever. Despite being defended by Daniel Webster, he was fined $800. That's outrageous. That's like letting the air out of football. And eventually forced to flee town. After over 170 years of use and saturated with dead, the town decided to build a new cemetery on Spring Street in 1852. The old burying ground was said to have over 2,000 bodies interred there. Is that right? Interred?
interred.
Interred.
Okay, fine. Today, there are 619 headstones and footstones still standing. The oldest tombstone dates back to 1708 and the newest 1897.
Cool.
So here I was on a stroll in a pleasant little piece of land, and look what all
And
I
you kind of
dug
stumbled
up.
across Dr. Frankenstein.
Dr. Frankenstein, using body for astronomical purposes.
Anatomical.
Astronomical.
So there you go. That's my little story.
All right.
Yeah, that was well worth it, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice work.
Yeah, thank you. Now you know why my wife never let me read to my son when he was little. So anyways, back to Roxie.
Now, I know. And,
Oh, you have
and
a question for me?
Roxie, no, I
Oh.
don't have a question for you. I noticed one of the pictures that Roxie sent to us was footstones, and I'd like to hear the story behind that footstone picture.
Sure, if we could go to that picture real quick. What was the name?
I think it's foot warmers.
Oh, the
Is the
foot
name
warmers.
foot warmers?
Yes, the foot warmers.
Yes.
So, a couple of years ago, we did what we like to call a lot
There it
of
is.
mountain goating with my husband's car up in the hills of Vermont. And I was looking for a few particular gravestones out in the woods, and I couldn't seem to find, these dirt trails out to these burying grounds. So I stopped at the Historical Society, and the guy just happened to be outside. And I says, "Oh, can you help me?" And he says, "You're looking for a cemetery, right?" And I said, "Yes!" I must have that look in my eye.
I get that a lot.
Yeah, me too. And he says, "Well, we're about to close." He says, "But do you want to come in?" And he says, "And I'll get you some information." I said, "Sure." And I walked in, and I looked at the shelf, and I'm like, "Oh, look at those." Old footstones, because back 16, 1700s, you had a headstone and a footstone to denote the head of the bed and the foot of the bed. So the head of the corpse is up by the headstone, foot of the corpse is down by the footstone.
Right.
And there came a time, when people said, "Well, I've got a hole in my basement, in my stone wall. I have stones that need to be repaired to go into my house." And, my feet are just feeling so cold at home right about now. Well, you know, there's a stone down in the burying ground that's just the right size. If I put it next to the fireplace,
my
warm it
God.
up, I can take it and rest my feet on it. And I found some foot warmer footstones. These were actual footstones that should have been in a cemetery somewhere
Oh my
Oh
with
my
God.
initials or names on it that people were using as footstones in their homes.
You took them home?
I didn't take them home. So
Imagine.
I saw them
I
there
would.
on display there. But
Wow.
it's actually all too common that people would go down to the cemetery and take the stones for whatever personal use they needed. I had someone come on my tour in York, and they told me that their old colonial home was quite haunted. They kept hearing someone walking around. They couldn't understand what was going on. And they had this huge parcel of property as it was an old farm. So they decided, you know what, we're just going to sell the place. They didn't spend too much time there to begin with. And they said, well, let's fix it up. Let's fix the old slate stairs out front. And they pulled apart the old slate stairs and turned over the steps.
my God.
And there were 3 gravestones that were there.
Oh my
So
God.
they did a very thorough walk through of this property they'd owned for years, and they found 1, 2, 3, 4 square stone walls, and they put the stones back in the burying ground.
Wow.
But yeah, back of fireplaces, it's not uncommon to find gravestones. They're all over the place. But those footstones I had to get a picture of.
That's I've never heard of that. That's
You know, that's another
crazy.
misconception. I mean, by amateurs, they go into cemeteries, they see these little stones, they said, oh, look, there's a child's grave.
oh well, I know. Yeah,
That's
people
so
say that all
common,
the time.
so common.
They don't know what a footstone
They
is.
don't know what a footstone is.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyways, interesting story, in Pelham, New Hampshire, just over the Dracut line where I live, there was a house that had a circular driveway. And new owners bought the house, and they were cleaning the property up. In the middle of the driveway was a bunch of stones. So they picked them up and put them on the porch. And then all hell broke loose in the house. They were having all kinds of hauntings and stuff. As it turned out, they were gravestones.
Oh my God.
So they put them back, and it all
There you go.
went back.
A friend of mine in Lebanon, Maine, bought her house in the 1980s, and the real estate agent removed the gravestones from her front yard, put them out in the woods behind her house.
nice.
And my friend kept telling me, along the hillside beside her house, she saw a man dressed as an old farmer walking straight across, but never down the hill. The hill went down, and she would see him going straight across as if he was like floating in air. And she finally took the gravestones and she put them against the tree at the front of her property. And she called the real estate agent after speaking to the Historical Society, and they moved them because they felt no one would want to buy the house because there was a
Ooh,
cemetery
I would.
there.
I'd buy it.
And they
I
were from
know,
the
right?
1800s.
Oh, right there. Yeah. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah, there's more stories out there than you can imagine of similar nature.
Did you ever go to a cemetery that you really didn't like, that really left you uncomfortable?
I've actually gone to quite a few where I've had to just turn around and walk out, whether it's my own sensitivity and, you know, kind of being open and picking up things. Sometimes you just feel the energy is really low, and you turn around and you walk out for whatever reason, personal preference, you know, something just doesn't feel right. I like to call it sticky sometimes. It just kind of feels sticky in here. I don't like it. And you just turn around and walk out. You have to be your own best barometer.
Right. Right. Wow.
Now, there are some cemeteries that really have horrid reputations, like Blood Cemetery.
It's all in the name. It's all in the name. And unfortunately, when cemeteries like they get a reputation, everybody flocks to them and they do damage.
Yeah.
You know, they overrun the grounds, they tip over the gravestones, and you know, if you want to get some sort of haunted experience, tip over a gravestone,
right.
something's going to happen. But yeah, it's all in the name. Spider gates. I mean, it's just in the name.
That was Roxie's opinion, was not that of Ghost Chronicles Next Generation or anything. We do not advise tipping over gravestones.
No, not at all, not at all. And I think anybody that does any damage to a cemetery. I mean, if you look at Eastern Cemetery up in Portland, Maine, from 1989 to 1991, 3 men with baseball bats destroyed 1,943 gravestones from the 16 and 1700s.
Idiots.
I mean, you want to talk about it's all going to come back on them someday, and those gravestones can't be replaced or repaired. So that's one thing that being in a cemetery, you definitely have an appreciation for the hand-carved work of these stones and the people that are buried there. You know, there's no excuse for cemetery
heart.
vandalism.
That breaks my heart.
Me too.
There's Oh my God, yeah. There's no words. There's no words for people like that. To me,
There should be a
you know.
special punishment for them.
Yes, there should. There should.
Well, cemeteries are their own museums.
Yeah.
You know, the hand-carved
absolutely.
stones, the
Totally.
people that are buried there. I wish more people would understand that.
We have a question from chat. John would like to know, Roxie, do you know anything about Resurrection Mary in Chicago Cemetery?
Well, there's a lot of stories about her origin. I know that there's supposedly a murder that prompted her spirit being there, that she's also possibly a lost soul, that she was pregnant. There's a lot of different stories about her origin, and there are a lot of people from all different sources that say she really does haunt there. My understanding is that she wears a blue dress and wanders around this part of the cemetery that may have been frequented by gangsters as well back in the day. The cemetery is in a lot of disrepair as well in the area where she's often seen. Some people say that it was a ritualistic killing, which I have a really hard time believing. But her spirit has been there for many, many years, according to a whole number of sources.
Right. It's actually a story is in our book, Ghost of Day. And Ursula Bolensky, who's, of course, from Chicago with a name like Bolensky, she has done a lot of research. She actually believes she found out. But the story is a common story, basically. Guys go to a what do you call it, a dance hall or a dance. They see a woman along the way, they pick her up, they go, they dance with her on the way home, they ask her to go by, and as they go by the cemetery, she disappears from the car. I mean, the short story, basically. But yeah, it's there's lots of stories on, and they're very similar, not only Resurrection Mary, but there are other very similar stories in other parts of the country as well. It's one of like the Phantom Hitchhiker one. which is
Right,
very
right, the
similar.
redheaded hitchhiker, yeah.
Yeah, like right here, yeah,
Right,
in
right.
Bridgewater Triangle.
44, right.
Yeah, so we have those stories, and sometimes it's difficult to separate the myth from the fact, you know. So it's difficult. So there are cemeteries that you found uncomfortable. Are the ones that you really, really make you emotionally better? I mean, happier, or bring you to a different level?
Yes. It would have to, I mean, no doubt I might have to be the Point of Graves in Portsmouth.
Now that's the one you have the ongoing what is it?
What?
Repertoire?
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 Yeah, there you go.
Rapport?
Rapport, that works too.
Yeah, I do a tour of the Point of Graves. I've been doing a tour there for about 10 years, and I do have a picture of her gravestone, if you can find it. It's Elizabeth Pierce, and she is the resident ghost there. And, you know, when we talk about ghosts, I'm not talking about someone up in the attic wearing a sheet and clanging, you know, a chain. She is just like you or I, and she is able to tell people that come to the cemetery who they've come in with.
Oh, wow.
And-
It's Point of Graves, I think,
Yeah,
is the title on the
Point
picture.
of Graves.
Sorry.
Yeah, Point of Graves in Portsmouth. Yep, that's Elizabeth's stone.
Kind of squishy,
yep.
sorry.
That's good.
1717. She has a death's head on there, and you know, I'll ask her through dowsing, can you tell us, Elizabeth, who in our group has come in with a spirit? And she'll tell us through dowsing, and you know, through a series of yes or no questions and multiple choice. She will indicate who has come in with a spirit, and then she'll give us all the details: male, female, past. You know, if she's been trying to get through to the person that's on the tour. And I've had people just stand there and start bawling their eyes out. You know, oh, I saw this thing that reminded me of my mother. Is this you? She's connected so many people with information that I have no idea about. I can't help but feel emotional, and people have emailed me and told me, you know, oh, I felt healed after I talked to Elizabeth. You know, I don't feel like I'm crazy. I was always told ghosts didn't exist, but now I know that someone's with me and I can feel better. And I think a lot of people miss that, that spirits do have a lot of information to share with us, and there is a comfort that we can get from them as well. And I first met Elizabeth just by walking around in the cemetery, and I felt someone touched me on my shoulder, and I'm like, was like, what is that? And learned a little bit more about Elizabeth and her story, and she's there every single time we go in. And you know, it's not that she is there because she's stuck. She's there to be a bridge to the other
wants to be.
side,
Oh, that's
and she chooses to be there.
nice.
So Rocky, you
That's a
mentioned
great
Rocky.
story.
So Roxy, let me start that up. Can I get a universal translator here, please? So Roxy, you mentioned your books and you mentioned your tours and so forth. So if anybody wanted to find out more information about what you do, where can they find that?
NewEnglandCuriosities.com is my website. I've been doing tours of Portsmouth. This will be my 14th year, including cemeteries in downtown. Or we have a Facebook page on New England Curiosities as well, where I post gravestones and their stories and all of that. And I always welcome stories for further research too on cemeteries. I've probably have 25, 30,000 pictures of gravestones in cemeteries
believe it.
throughout New England. So there's so many stories out there. But New England Curiosities is me.
Excellent.
Okay.
And I want to mention something really quick about Roxy that's very cool. She does fairy houses
What?
too.
What?
Little cute fairy houses.
fairy
They're adorable.
houses.
No, stop it. They're adorable.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
is that just a pastime for you? I know you have them on Etsy.
Yeah, I have been selling them on Etsy, and I do custom order fairy houses. And one of my favorite childhood stories was Thumbelina, so I kind of get back into that childlike mode by building fairy houses.
Oh, that's
and Portsmouth has the Fairy House Festival every year.
Oh, cool.
And you do know, the purpose of a fairy house.
I don't. What's the purpose of a fairy house?
What do you think the purpose is of
look
a
at that.
fairy
See-
house?
see that?
No, I know what
That's
it
the
is. I'm
reverse.
interested to think what you
People
think it
actually
is.
built fairy houses to attract fairies.
Yes.
The purpose of it was they would build not only houses but gardens as well, fairy gardens
Yeah.
as well. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, that's
it's
good.
to,
Wow,
it's
that's
to
good. I
bring
can
the
sleep
fairy
tonight.
blessings.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if you find, something missing, it's probably the fairy. So you might
in
want to
the
put a
fairy
little
house?
something out for them, so they don't, they don't steal your left earring or, your keys.
That's what happened to that.
Yeah.
I thought it was the
they're
box
fairies.
gnomes.
The fairies had it.
The box
It's like
gnomes.
that old story, the kids' book, The Borrowers. Remember that?
Remember that?
But anyways, we do have to wrap up
We
because
do.
we're running out of time.
We do.
I did want to mention that Roxy is a very prolific author. She has how many books do you have?
7.
7 books. And Massachusetts Book of the Dead. There's a New Hampshire
Yep.
Book of the
New
Dead.
Hampshire Book of the Dead.
Yep.
Haunted Portsmouth.
I'm in that one.
Yep.
good
You're
for
in that
you.
one. Haunted York County. Haunted Pubs in New England. Haunted Portland. I also have DVDs.
You do? We
I
didn't know
do.
that. Oh,
I do.
Let me see.
I'll
Let me
have
see. Let me
to-
see.
yep, I'll have to-
DVDs.
yep.
Wow. Oh, I can't see.
DVD
What
and
does that
CD.
say?
Voices from the Shadows.
Voices from the Shadows.
Oh, what's it
From the
about?
Shadows.
Here you go.
You can
There
have
you
it.
go.
Oh.
It's for you. It's a gift.
You
Ooh.
got a gift. Nice.
So what's it about?
Ghost stories tells you on the back all different ghost stories from New England.
Ooh.
Well, we do have to wrap up.
We do?
And we wanted to say thank you to Roxy.
Thank
we
you.
enjoyed having you here so much. I learned something. I always love to learn more about cemeteries, and
I get a free
probably
gift.
will never stop learning. So check out Roxy's website, and we will see you again next month on Ghost Chronicles Next Generation.
Yep.
So till then, take care. We'll see you soon.
Give me my shovel. I'll see what I can dig up.
From ghoulies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.